David Keeley is going to take us through the thinking behind and some of the learnings from the Enterprise Island's recently launched Innovation Scorecard. We all know that benchmarking is absolutely critical if you want to be able to track and communicate progress that you're making. So tools such as this scorecard have got a really important role to play in supporting organizations as their innovation capabilities and confidence increases. So I will hand over to David, who will need very little introduction to many of you. I was just going to leave an awkward pause there and not say anything else, but I will do. So David comes from a background in mechanical engineering and is the Senior Executive for Innovation in Enterprise Island. He's working hard to increase collaboration across the island and is also a very active member of the NSAI team that's working on the ISO 56000 suite of innovation standards. So David, thank you so much for leading this today, and you have the controls.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Charlie. Hi, everybody. So I'll share my screen now. There's a little bit of a video in this, so I'll share audio, but if it doesn't work, just let me know and we'll shoot past that slide. So it's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but we can go back and to any of the slides at the end when there's questions and answers, and I want to leave plenty of room for discussion, because that's always the fun part of these sessions, I find, rather than the presentation. That's what I can all bore you with. But just kind of share my screen first. So you might let me know if you can see that.
Yep, we've got that. Thanks, David.
Okay. So just a little bit about the background to this. So the Innovation Scorecard project was primarily driven out of our our 2019 innovation strategy. On pillar 1, client delivery. So the ambition there is to deliver an effective innovation roadmap to each client that is consistent with their capabilities and ambition. And one of the strategic objectives there was to have an advanced innovation diagnostic in line with international standards. So under Enterprise Ireland have a standard engagement model that we use with all of our clients, and there's 6 pillars in it, and one of those pillars is innovation. So some of the work we're doing at the minute is redesigning a framework of how we engage with clients under that. So we're considering a number of different frameworks at the minute, and this is one of them, just to give you an idea of our thinking. So when we're talking to clients about innovation, we're really trying to drive effective innovation. So in other words, drive the business outcomes that they're looking for. And that's we really look at around the area of, you know, their innovation capability, their technology awareness and use, and wider strategic intelligence, and then their ambition and performance. The scorecard kind of fits into that as a way to feed into the capability piece. So how can we get a sense of where clients are in their capability? We see capability as the engine for innovation is probably the best way to look at it. And I'll go through it, but a piece there on what the kind of the house, the heat map and the scorecard looks like, but we'll have a little look at that later on. But each scorecard has a unique kind of fingerprint nearly, or heat map for each report based on the answers that are given back, and it's a really useful way for clients to engage with the report and to get a high level view of their position and where their strengths and weaknesses are. So why are we doing this? Well, ultimately it's about trying to bring clients on a journey. You know, and as we develop their innovation capability, we should see better innovation performance and better business outcomes for those organizations over the long term. And some of those outcomes will be specific to organizations, but some of them, like productivity, will be areas that we're interested in from a policy point of view, obviously, also. Then this is an example of where the innovation scorecard may be used in a type of innovation engagement with the client. So, you know, the first step in all of our processes now on innovation engagements is that the client completes the scorecard, and this then maps out how we might bring them on an innovation roadmap development journey. We're not going to get into any detail about what the different types of innovation engagements we have today, but suffice to say that there are lots of different ones, but the scorecard is always the starting point for us. So we did utilise the Public Service Innovation Fund to come up with the scorecard. It's an innovation in itself. It was a joint application between Enterprise Ireland and IDA Ireland. We can see the objective that we set out there, and then we got 50,000 euros in funding. And I do have a video that we submitted with our application. I think it only runs for about a minute or a minute and a half, but it's very good. It was actually put together by our grad team. At the time, used on freeware, but it's a very good piece of media to kind of communicate what we were trying to do.
Can others hear sound?
No, sorry, no sound coming through, David.
Are you not getting the sound? No?
No.
Let's try that. Let's try it one more time. What I'm going to do is I might not click the button to share sound. Just give me, if it doesn't, go straight past it. Right. Are you seeing the screen again?
Yeah.
Okay. So you might let me know if you're hearing this when I press play this time.
At Enterprise Ireland, we are passionate about growing Irish industry sustainably through innovation. For our clients to succeed, they need a strong and innovative public sector supporting them and their employees.
Are you hearing that?
Yeah, we are. Sorry, yes.
That includes us too. Our vision is to be an innovation leader in the public sector that supports and inspires our clients and our public sector partners to reach for innovation excellence. We want to develop a digital tool for Irish industry and the entire public sector that will help them assess their innovation capability, understand the route to success, learn from each other and collaborate. The output of this would be a digital innovation assessment tool that is aligned with the international best practice. And would be free to use by the entire public sector. The digital platform would allow for rapid deployment around the public sector. Organisations in the public sector could easily generate effective insights and monitor trends, with the end result moving the dial more rapidly towards innovation across the public sector and closer alignment with industry.
No, that's it. Let's see. Okay, so for the fund, we promised to deliver 3 versions of our tool: one for ourselves, one for IDA Ireland, and one for our public service team in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. And each organisation would get 3 things. They would get a lightweight assessment tool around the innovation principles in ISO 56000. They would get an innovation management system assessment tool, which is around the innovation management system elements in the ISO 56002. And then some business intelligence tools to allow them to analyze the data and develop insights. And we delivered on that at the end of 2020. We were funded in that year and delivered on the end of that year. So what is the Innovation Scorecard? Well, it's an online assessment tool. It's multiple choice, and it can be sized for use on a desktop or a mobile device. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes to complete. It's fully aligned with ISO 56000. For the main tool we use is the one that's aligned with 56002. We haven't really rolled out the principles or the lightweight assessment tool. So the one that most of the 3 organisations are using at scale at the minute is the one around the innovation management system. Once the client completes the questionnaire, it automatically generates a personalized PDF report and sends it to them by email. So there's no waiting around for someone on our side to process it. So what does the report look like? It's a 14-page PDF report, personalized based on client responses, and it's emailed to them automatically. Start of the report, find an introduction to the innovation maturity model and an overall client innovation maturity score. and then a heat map that really helps to summarize their performance in each of the key innovation elements. I should say not all elements of the ISO 56002 model are here. We did choose to leave some of them out, notably policy and communication, and that was just because you'll see the approach we used in developing this later on, and we found we reached a tipping point with clients that if we were asking too many questions, they were less likely to engage with the tool. So we had to get to that sweet spot. But we do bring that into further on engagements, the rest of the element areas. So the follow-on pages are made up of deeper dives into each of the areas of the innovation framework. Clients will be able to see the answer that they recorded. So this is an example here, and then a tailored action to consider based on the answer that they provided. And then we also give them some potential supports in context for the area that they're looking at. So how can the scorecard help? I'm not going to read this in any great detail, but the fundamental for us is it really helps us establish where clients are on the innovation journey. For clients, it really highlights the key strengths and weaknesses and appropriate next step, and it signposts them to those potential supports. But it's been really useful for us as a way to start a meaningful conversation around innovation with clients. It's been much more effective than we could have anticipated. Followed a fairly typical design approach to putting this together. Probably the best thing here, as you can see, there may have been some people in this call involved in it. Certainly, we had quite a number of colleagues from the NSAI technical committee involved in it. But you can see even up here, our early versions were very basic prototypes just to test the principles of what we were trying to do, and we evolved with different approaches over time until we reached the design that we were happy with. And it was only when we got to this from a kind of prototype stage that we engaged with the software company to help us put the solution in place and deploy it. So all of this stuff down here was just kind of sticky tape and and plasters and all the rest of it, just to get something that works. So a typical approach to kind of doing that, and we spent a lot of time and a lot of iterations on a lot of client feedback to really refine it and get it to the point where it was engaging for clients. As I said, we did develop 3 versions. So there's a version for Enterprise Ireland, a version for IDA Ireland, and Deeper, our public service team in Deeper. And the language in each version is tailored, but the supports are tailored, and the responses are tailored. But they're all based on the same underlying framework. And that's, anybody who's familiar with ISO 56002 will understand that that's the way it's been set up. But it's an innovation framework for all organizations, regardless of whether they're commercial or public sector. So just a note to say that Enterprise Ireland do have capability to do an individual scorecard report, but also we can create company scorecard reports. So we have the capability to go and engage with up to 30 individuals in a company and then collate all those responses into a single report, which gives average answers and shows what the variances in answers are, and then compares average answers with the CEO score within that. And that's been a very useful addition to our arsenal, and makes for very interesting engagement with clients on their innovation position. So feedback from clients was overwhelmingly positive. They really, first of all, they found filling out the tool very easy, but overwhelmingly they find the report to be really useful in their business plan. And once we hear that, then we know we're onto the right thing with our clients. But you can see some of the feedback that we got from clients along the way as we were developing it and using it. Similar feedback from IDA Ireland clients. That was we also spoke to their clients and the public service when we were developing the tool. So in the terms of the 2021 rollout to date, and this is in 2021 only, and we only really started using it this year in May, we've had 385 client employees complete service this year. That's made up of 139 different client companies, and that's across 8 sectors. So we've quite an amount of data at this point. And the good news is that we are analysing this data. So I've given a fairly benign kind of chart there from our BI system that's looking at the data. But I suppose the reason I'm showing that is just to show that we are crunching this data and we're trying to develop insights from it. Now, we have got other kind of analytics that we've done on this that maybe aren't shown on the screen, but some of the key things that we've been able to do so far is we can analyze the scores that clients are giving us in terms of their capability. We can see what the averages, what the variances are. And that, looking at their capability allows us to understand their need, but we're also able to analyze their sentiment, so what they're asking for, what they want. So at the end of the report, there's a free text area where we ask them, having read everything, gone through the report and read it, is there a development area that you would like to look at? And then we mine that data for certain keywords and certain triggers to let us know which of the capability areas that they're actually asking for support on. So what we can see is that one of the key areas the clients is looking for is around operations. And they're really trying to understand what are suitable innovation processes for my organization. So I understand all of these things, but how do I actually make innovation real within the organization? What are the types of ideation processes that are useful and relevant to my organization? What are the types of scaling frameworks that are useful and relevant to my organization? And then how do I deploy and deliver on solutions in a meaningful way? You know, is it a gate model? Is it a project management? Is it some other methodology that I want to use? And that's nearly the area that they want to start, but then they want to build the other capability areas around it. Another area that's really jumped out is the whole area of innovation metrics. So clients are really interested in being able to clearly establish not only the business outcomes that they're looking for from innovation, but what are the key metrics that allow them to understand whether or not they're performing, whether or not they're on their path to reaching the objectives that they want to reach. One other interesting area that came out of the analysis was that clients overall seem to be performing really well in the kind of the top area of the framework. So if we go back to our house diagram for a second. So if we look at this diagram here, when we look at the overall analysis from operations up, clients tend to perform stronger in this area or indicate stronger performance in this area than they do in the supports area, and also in the evaluation and the improvement area. And what we're finding as we get into deeper dive into the analysis is that this is actually pointing potentially towards an issue with strategy and strategy implementation. So clients are indicating reasonably strong performance and strategy, but what you see when you look at the other areas around that strategy, that maybe they don't have a clear vision, or they don't have a clear plan, or resources or skills in place for delivering on that strategy. And what we sense might be going on there, and it needs a little bit more analysis, is that when clients are saying that they have a clear innovation strategy, what we're saying is they have a clear sense of their strategic direction in innovation, but perhaps not an innovation strategy, and that they're struggling to actually implement those strategies, both from a high level objectives point of view, but also putting the supports in place to be able to deliver on. Some of the other areas that are quite interesting is the difference between CEO view and non-CEO view. In terms of what are the big areas that CEOs are overestimating or underestimating their capability compared to non-CEOs within organizations. And what we're seeing is that CEOs are really overestimating on areas like collaboration, and they're overestimating on areas like their objectives and their planning. So have they got clear plans and objectives in place? And also on metrics. And when we look at the non-CEOs within the organizations, they have a much better opinion of where things like company culture is compared to CEOs. Now it's early days yet. The data set isn't big enough yet to really stand over these, but we're starting to see some clear patterns emerge. The other last thing it says, what we're seeing also is that there's a lot of hidden strength within different sectors that we look at. So if we look at, for example, the food sector, and we look at that, we have three principal subsectors within that, but all three of those subsectors perform really highly in insight gathering and analysis. And that's because they have to. That's because consumer behaviors change so fast in that industry that if they don't have the finger in the pulse, then they can't stay in the game. But the question for us is that we have other sectors where it's very weak. So how can we diffuse those kind of capabilities, those learnings, those approaches to other sectors to build capability? And the same goes for some other areas. The two sectors that we saw that were performing best overall were life sciences and digitalization, which perhaps is unsurprising. We all know that there are sectors that are heavily involved or have high levels of innovation. And then the last piece it says that large companies tend to have better innovation capability, but tend not to have as good performance and innovation based on the analysis that we've done, which is an interesting area that we need to look a little bit further into. But yeah, look, I can talk for a while about this, but I think I've kind of reached the halfway mark, and I'd probably stop talking and open the floor to any questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, David. I think as usual, if people want to put a virtual hand up, or if you can't do that, then put a question into the chat. While we wait for the hands to go up, David, I've got a couple of questions. One very easy one. The data set, is that the EI data set, or is it the combined EI, IDA, and public sector?
No, it's the EI data set. I don't have access, as you would expect. I don't have access to IDA. Okay. Data or public service organization kind of data. Okay, thanks. And my sort of, I suppose, most challenging question is, because of the differing sectors that Enterprise Island, IDA, and public sector obviously targeting, what were the areas, or were there any areas where it was particularly difficult for you to get consensus on what good should look like in a kind of a standardized report across all three? So we had a couple of challenges in rolling this out. Like any new innovation, there was a number of, I suppose, champions or cheerleaders within the organization who really ran with it and used it, at a significant scale with their clients in those other areas that there weren't. What was interesting was that one of the sectors that we saw the highest usage of the tool was actually in construction. But yet we saw construction come back with some of the poorest scores in some areas. So we're wondering if the scale at which it's used is actually building on the bias. Some of the areas that in terms of building, talk about building a consensus of what good looks like. It's challenging in Enterprise Ireland because the level that we don't have enough resolution yet on the detail on the data. So we have sectors that would be made up of types of companies that you wouldn't necessarily put together, right? So there's still some work to be done about building up the data set to really establish meaningful insights at that level, Charlie. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, with two hands up, I'll go to Brian Durnan first, because I know you have to drop off before the end of the call, so we'll do your first, Brian.
Yeah. David, thanks very much. It was good. And Charlie, you covered quite a lot of the questions I was going to ask there.
I only asked one.
Yeah. But the one thing I'm very interested in, David, is the data, collecting all of the data and how you get to use that going forward. Are you using it in any situation where you're actually identifying regional clusters or places where there's an adequacy in a particular type of innovation, or even places where there's expertise, perhaps somewhere close to universities are a lot better than the other Hebrides of Donegal or something. Is he getting any information? I know the data set's small, but is that something you're going to try and build into this?
Absolutely. So, I mean, first thing to say is that we've only really just reached a point where we started looking at the data. We've been trying to hold off for as long as possible, because smaller the data set, the more chance that you're going to be looking at patterns that aren't there, or biases that are kind of, you know, percolating through the data. But we've done a first pass on it, but we know that the data is going to be utilised within our wider EI data analysis. We do the annual business review. We collect data from companies around the country. So we're going to be using the Innovation Scorecard data in parallel with that to look at exactly the type of things you're looking at. So where some of the things we're starting to see are sectors where, you know, things like business model innovation aren't as widely understood or known as sectors where they right. So we're looking at sectors where collaboration is much lower than we would have expected. And is there a correlation between where collaboration is high and maybe the technology gateways or the technology centers that are located in those regions? So, but as you said, the data set's very small at the minute. We've just done a first pass. I certainly wouldn't stand over any of the insights that we've developed so far. They're more indicators at this stage, I guess, or things of interest to look at. But every piece of data we have is coded with the unique identifier of the company. So that means that we have this interoperability between the data we're collecting on the scorecard and the data that we have on our wider data set. So we're in a good position to go and do these kind of cross data set analysis at a later point, and that's where we want to get to.
Okay. That's great. Thank you for that. Thank you, David.
Okay, thanks, David. I know Shirley has a follow-up question to that, but we'll go to Brian Kennedy first and then come back to the other scorecards.
Hey, David, thanks for that. That was very interesting. My question is around metrics, so maybe it does actually relate to what Shirley's asking. What have you found from a metrics perspective? Are you proposing any sort of metrics to client organizations as to how to measure innovation outcomes and success? Because it's an area everyone struggles with, how do you actually measure innovation? And, you can't obviously use the same sort of metrics that you would use for short-term and more, standard project activities and performance engine activities.
David and Brian, between them, have pretty much asked the question I was going to ask anyhow, because I think it's really interesting. I think the interest is in the detail and the granularity of the data that you have. For example, you say health science, unsurprisingly, is better than other sectors, but it would be interesting to link that with things like regional innovation scorecards in different parts of the country. I think that is super interesting. So that was my question, and sorry I have to leave in 5 minutes for another meeting. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So we ask a question in the scorecard about how they measure, what's their, I think the way we term it is, do they have a principal measure of innovation effectiveness, so how much bang they're getting from their buck. What we see predominantly from clients is that they either have an ineffective measure, so they're looking at something like total revenue, or they don't, or it's unknown, they just don't know, they've never thought about it, right? We get a small portion, or smaller than we'd like, portion of clients who are looking at things like, percentage of revenue from new quality services or margin from innovation or something like that. But actually, the way we address that, Brian, is then our follow-on engagements, which I suppose we're not really kind of getting into here today. So we've been piloting a series of new types of roadmap engagements with clients, which is based around the same framework, this 56002 framework. And when we're doing those engagements, whether it's a light 1-day engagement or a more comprehensive 7-day planning engagement, and these are done by consultants who have been trained in the same framework, there has to be innovation metrics in there, right? So if it's a very simple roadmap, we still ask for one innovation metric to be in there, and that metric needs to be either output or outcome focused. And it needs to be over a 12-month kind of period. But if we're doing a kind of multi-phase innovation, if we're doing a multi-phase innovation roadmap, then we still say, look, you need to define what the business outcome that you're looking for at the end of this, the point you're trying to get to and how you're going to measure that. But along the way, you can have a mix of, input, throughput, and output metrics that are appropriate to the plan that you've put in place, as long as they give you a way to understand in a meaningful way the progress that you're making on your innovation journey and whether you're tracking to the outcome that you were looking to achieve.
Okay, thanks, David.
Okay, thank you. John, I think you had your hand up there.
Yeah, Dave, great. Thanks for the presentation, Dave. Very, very informative, actually. What I'm curious to know, actually, is the actions to consider. How generic or customized are those cross-sector with regard to the innovation? And then, I know the same principle applies, but
yeah, so they're pretty generic, and there's a couple of reasons for that. First one is just keeping the tool simple, right? So if we're building in a way to provide specific directions to specific sectors, that's going to make it quite complex. Now, that's not to say we do have the capability to do that in the future. There's no technological reason why we wouldn't do that. And bringing a technology like AI into that would even make it even better, right? But that's dependent on a good data set being in there in the first place. But the other reason, John, is that Enterprise Ireland as a state agency tends not to give direct instructions to clients about what they should do tactically, where we can avoid it. We tend to leave that up to the experts and the consultants and this is their bread and butter. But we do give enough of a direction as something to think about, right? But it wouldn't be tactical, fully tactical in nature. And that was more of a strategic decision on our point, not to get to that kind of tactical because we don't want to end up at a point where the client turns around and say, well, I did this because you had it on your scorecard today, which would happen, but that's why, the scorecard is the starting point in the journey for us. It's not the end point in the journey. So, and then, we go back to the slide I showed you on our innovation strategy. It's about an effective innovation roadmap that's aligned for every client, that's aligned with their capability and ambition. So for clients on one end of the spectrum, that could be, a one-page document with 3 actions over the next 12 months, just to kind of take some key activities, right? But for other clients who are further along their innovation journey, that could be quite a comprehensive engagement, over multiple phases, looking at multiple capability areas with very ambitious plans and ambitious targets for outcomes. Did I answer your question?
Sorry, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw a second one at you. I'm disappointed to hear that you can't share the information, even from an obfuscation perspective, between the 3 different agencies, the IDA and that, because sometimes actually that's where the richness is going to be.
Sorry, I answered the question that was asked me is the data that we're looking at EI data or IDA data or deeper. The data we're looking at is EI data, and I can't look at directly on demand IDA Ireland or deeper data. However, the tool was designed with exactly in mind what you just talked about. I mean, the fundamental reason for this was that EI and IDA are promoting the same framework around innovation so that we can create common conversations between EI clients and IDA clients. And there's no, this common language or common structure around this to really help with this diffusion of innovation capability. And it works both ways, by the way. Like we know that EI clients are stronger performers in some key areas of innovation capability. This whole line that we have about the multinationals have all the innovation capability. It's not necessarily true, and I know everybody in this room will probably have experience with that. But overall, the IDA companies appear to be stronger. But when you start looking at granularly, I think we start to understand why IDA companies target certain Indigenous Irish companies to work with, because they bring a lot of strong capability into the overall position.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you. Shane?
Hi, David. Yeah, just a quick question around, because I'm not clear who has access to this. Is this just for EI clients? Is it an entry point for prospective clients, or is it open? Like, is it can anybody go and fill this out?
That's a really good question, Chief. So the answer is right now that, and I can only speak. So there's no technology limitation to stop this being freely available to whoever wants to use it, right? So that's the first thing to say. Second thing to say is that then it's up to each organization to decide how they want to promote it and who they want to make it available to. So I can only speak for EI, I guess, in this, but on the EI side, we've been running a pilot this year to kind of, see whether this resonates with clients, see whether, certain selected clients see whether they like it or don't like it, and then what the follow-up engagements are. The view would be, the direction that I'm getting at the minute is that next year we want to make this freely available to all EI clients on demand, and actually all Leo clients on demand, so pretty much free for anybody who comes in to use it. So I think that's where we're probably heading next year. But there's something we need to plan for that. There's some kind of infrastructure stuff in the background that we need that. But certainly there's no reason it can't be done.
Great. Yeah, no, the reason for the question was partly just to understand, but also because I guess it, if you narrow who has access to it, then that naturally puts a bias into the data that you get out of it, rather than getting a sense of what's happening in the broader market. But no, it's a great tool. Thank you.
And I suppose a follow-up to that is there a minimum size of organization that you think would get value from this? Is it 25 people plus, or presumably not micro businesses?
Yeah, so we put at the start of the year, we said we put guidance in to say, look, you shouldn't use this with any companies that have less than 10 employees. But actually, as we went through the year, we kind of modified that to say it's more like less than 20, 25. But what we do is next year we roll out the kind of lighter weight tool, the tools based around the innovation principles, and make that available to startups and micros, and perhaps to a number of Leos as well.
Okay, good stuff. And are you finding, sorry, did you have more presentation to do? I know you kind of said that's about halfway through. I'll take some questions. Is there more you want to go through? No, that's...
I'm kind of, there's lots more I can put in there, but I didn't overdo it either.
Okay.
But the key for us is that we've been able to validate this tool with clients that it works. Like when we get a referral from a DA, let's say, our development advisor, who are client relationship managers. And what we would have found previously is that it would have been kind of hard to engage with clients on innovation, because either they wanted to talk about a project, which is fine, but it's not what we're here talking about. That the DA will talking about that on a case-by-case basis. We're meant to talk about their innovation, business development, capability development. And that was always a struggle with client companies. But what we find is that when they fill out this survey, when they get the report, they want to speak to us, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the proof in the pudding. Now that conversation still might not go anywhere, but usually it does. And there's always, we have a whole staircase supports, and at a minimum we can get them on to something like a specific one-day course around culture of innovation or innovation planning or processes or something like that. And we are open then next year to referring clients on to other courses run by other organizations that are suitable, like Intertrade or SkillNet or whatever. We're not going to just refer them on to things we do. We want them to get, so it's all about having the right support to the right client at the right time.
And are you seeing the value? Sorry, John, I'll come to you in a second. But are you seeing the value for organisations is the report, or what the report can lead on to in terms of the support programs?
Yeah, it's what the report can lead on to. The report was always designed as an engagement piece, an awareness building piece, getting, what we wanted, tried to design the experience so that, the clients would open the report and then they'd turn pages of the report and then they'd put their hands up and say, yeah, I'd like to talk to someone a little bit this. Like, if it does that, then that's exactly what it was designed to do. The stuff around, because it's not a benchmarking tool, right? Because you can't get a benchmark person filling in a form, without anybody in the room to facilitate it. And you can't do that with one viewpoint anyway, you need multiple viewpoints. But it does give an indication, right, of where they are. So if there's a follow-up to an innovation scorecard being completed, we're having a conversation with a client and that client says they want to do something, then we're winning.
Okay, good stuff, thank you. John, you had another question?
Yeah, if you mind, what's your scorecard value from an Enterprise Ireland perspective, or have you completed the process yourselves? Sorry, Dave, I had to ask.
It's being recorded. I thought we were friends, John. No.
I'll tell you what, then, to take the pressure off, I won't ask you to answer that one. What lessons would you have learned from the activity of putting this innovation together?
No, well, I'll answer your first question first. So we obviously developed the Public Service Innovation Scorecard for Deeper, but actually what we did was we developed a custom version of the scorecard for ourselves in Enterprise Ireland, and we did that about 7 or 8 months ago. Now it went in the back burner a little bit because other things come up, like all state agencies. We've been fairly snowed under, but actually in the past 3 weeks, we've demoed that with our first 2 departments in Enterprise Ireland. And I believe the ambition is we're obviously going through a big strategic review in Enterprise Ireland at the minute. We've got a new CEO, as I'm sure you're aware, and we're into a strategy cycle. But what we're hoping to see and expecting to see is that the public service innovation piece is going to play a big role in that. And I know that it's been suggested that the ambition is to kind of run the survey and build awareness and generate activity with the whole organisation around innovation. So what was the second part of your question there, John?
I suppose a lesson learned from the activity of putting the scorecard together, because as everyone says, it's what everyone actually wants to see out there.
Lessons learned. Probably lesson learned is it's great to win money on the Public Service Innovation Fund. It's not great to have to deliver on it when you have to do the rest of your job. But I don't think you speak to anybody in this room that says that innovation is never easy, is it? But the lesson was that I think collaborate, get as much views as possible. I come from a product development background, so I kind of used a lot of the approaches that I would have used with that in what I did with this, and I kind of stayed away from the hard coding bit of it, I guess, for as long as possible. But using prototype tools, talking to the people using it, get into that quick loop of iterate, test, improve, kind of get, all that. And then probably where I perhaps kind of could have done better, I think, was promoting the tool really within, internal stakeholders and then clients, right? So really being able to sell the value of it quicker. And probably when I was designing it, maybe should have made it a little bit more flexible to allow it to be adapted for other types of things like digitalization and climate and things like that.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just about to ask if anybody that hasn't spoken would like to ask a question. Kim, you conveniently put your hand up, so please ask away. Oh, you're on mute, I'm afraid. You're on mute, Kim. Sorry.
Rookie mistake after all this time. You think I'd know? Apologies. Sorry, I'm new to the group and it's my first time attending a meeting, and I managed to join late, so apologies for that. So you might have covered this, but just I was wondering, I'm from the Big Idea. It's a creative empowered transition year program where we're instilling the creative process, which is basically the innovation process, into student learning. And my question is, what was your definition of innovation? And again, did you trial it? I saw the slide that you mentioned, the CEO level and CEO level, but innovation maybe from a ground up approach. Was there any, I guess there's two questions there, but how did you manage to, or did you manage to capture that?
So we tend not to get, so we have a strategic position on what we see innovation as, and then when we promote the tool, we promote the message, the ISO 56000 series view on what innovation is. And you'll see that in the survey, the introduction piece of the survey, the tool, and then on the first page of it. We tend not to dictate to clients what innovation is. Everybody tends to have their own view on it. If we feel that there is some development required, maybe on expanding their view on what it is, then we do that. But lots of clients have different orientations about their innovation ambition and their innovation practice. We've lots of clients who are very R&D centric, and then we have other clients who are very service centric. And we tend not to try and project our view too strongly into that, but rather what we try to do through the 56000 series, 56000 framework, is help them to develop their innovation engine to arrive at the most effective position for them as an organization. So that probably sounds like I'm trying to give a fuzzy answer, but I'm not. It's just it's not like financial services, or it's not like there's no right or wrong or black and white. Although we'll see what 56001 looks like, Charlie will.
Indeed.
But what we try and do is make sure that if a company, and 56002 actually makes this very clear at the outset. It says, Charlie, you can come in this if I'm articulating this wrongly, because but it says it's not necessarily about being the best performer in all these boxes or all these capability areas. It's about building capability in the elements that are right for you as an organization to reach the business outcomes that you need. And that's exactly what we do. We don't go in and say to every company, you need to make your definition of innovation this, you need to light up all these boxes. It's about, do you know where you're going? Do you know what that looks like, how you're going to measure it? And are you building the right capabilities and taking the right steps to get to where you need to be?
That's a good summary of it, David. I mean, I would use this sort of term that it's 56002 doesn't tell you how to innovate. It says if you're innovating, these are the things that you should be considering and be taking into account, but it's not going to tell you that you should be using creativity or design thinking or online collaboration or whatever. It would just say, if you're doing those things, make sure you're considering all of this stuff as well. And that's the strength of it. And that's going to be the challenge of getting that reflected through into the certifiable standard when that comes out in 2 or 3 years' time.
And I think what I would add to that is that's actually a piece that really resonates with clients when we speak to them. And I'm sure that there's lots of consultants on this call, and they're perhaps used to speaking to clients in this way, so I don't mean this in any patronizing way. But when we frame this as a system for clients, when we get them to say that this is a system within the organization that you're pumping a lot of time and money and resource into, and it has to perform for you. And do you know if it's performing? Do you know how you want it to perform? Do you know if it's performing? Because otherwise, why are you spending so much money on it? And that's when you frame the conversation like that, you get this. It's a bit like, oh, I've never thought about it that way. Now, not all the time. We have a lot of clients who are quite sophisticated thinking as you would expect. But it's really that kind of top-down kind of piece. Where you're saying that let's try and figure out where you're trying to get to, and then see if this profile that you've currently got is sufficient to get you there.
Good stuff. Thank you. Thank you very much, David. I've just had the 5-minute warning pop up here on my screen. So if unless anybody has any burning questions that they'd like to sort of throw into the mix, and I will bring it to a close. We'll just give you a second. There was a round of applause. There was a question there. It's a round of applause from John. Yes. So thank you, David. Thank you very much for your time. And for some great questions from everybody as well. And a couple of new faces. So Kim, you're very welcome to join us today, and make sure you have a look at the LinkedIn group if you're not in it already. I think you might be. I think I recognise your name. So we've got quite a lot of stuff coming up over the next few weeks. You may have seen a flurry of activity on LinkedIn. We've got Brian Dernan, who was on the call earlier, talking, well, demystifying, hopefully, transactional analysis next week, which should, in simple terms, should be useful for anybody who likes to improve their communication skills. So definitely I'm going to be on that one. The week after, anybody involved in any kind of R&D or innovation on the island, north or south, should have a listen to Brendan Burns, who's going to be talking about R&D tax credits. It's probably the wrong term to use, but ultimately that's where you can get money back for stuff you're already doing. So it should be of interest to anybody that's doing that stuff at the moment. And we've got a couple of events lined up in December at the moment, which aren't on LinkedIn yet. So look out for those coming through. If you're not following the Innovate Island company page on LinkedIn, then follow that, and that will make sure you get prompted when those things come in. So with about 3 minutes to go, just a big thank you to everybody for coming along today and contributing, and especially, of course, David for taking us through the scorecard. I think it's a really important step that's been taken by yourselves, and we all want to know what innovation looks like on the island.
I'd just like to add, if I could just know when John is doing his presentation, so I can prepare my difficult questions. So.
We'll keep that in mind.
Thanks for that, David. Yeah, I know where to shoot as well, actually, so it's okay.
Okay, so with that, just have a great weekend, everybody, and hopefully see you at the next week or one of the future events as well. So take care, everyone, and see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, David. Thanks. Bye-bye.